The night before, Olivia's path to peace. Olivia stared at the digital clock on her nightstand, its blue glow casting soft shadows across her bedroom walls. 11:42 p.m. She'd been lying in bed for over an hour, her mind spinning like a carousel that refused to slow down. Tomorrow was the neurological breakthrough conference she'd been anticipating for months, a gathering of the brightest minds in her field, and she was slated to attend every session, absorbing knowledge that could transform her research. "I need to sleep," she whispered to the darkness. "I absolutely need to sleep." But sleep, like happiness, rarely comes when pursued directly. The more Olivia tried to force herself into unconsciousness, the more alert she became. Her breathing quickened as she calculated the diminishing hours of rest available to her. 6 hours if she fell asleep now. 5.5 if she fell asleep in 30 minutes. 5 if sleep continued to elude her for another hour. Each calculation only intensified her racing thoughts, creating a spiral of anxiety that pushed sleep further away with every worried heartbeat. Olivia rolled onto her side, punching her pillow into what should have been a more comfortable shape. The sheets felt too warm, then too cool when she kicked them away. Her nightgown twisted uncomfortably around her waist, every small discomfort magnified in the quiet of the night. The soft hum of the air conditioning system, barely noticeable during daylight hours, now seemed to pulse with irritating persistence. Even the faint streetlight filtering through her curtains felt invasive, painting patterns on her ceiling that her restless mind transformed into distracting shapes. "This is ridiculous," she told herself. "I'm a neurologist. I understand sleep better than most people." Yet understanding sleep and experiencing it were entirely different matters. Knowledge didn't automatically translate to peace. She knew about the various sleep stages, the importance of REM sleep for cognitive function, and even the neurochemical processes that initiated and maintained healthy sleep patterns. But in this moment, all that knowledge felt theoretical, distant, like reading about swimming while drowning. As midnight approached, Olivia felt the first tendrils of genuine fear growing in her chest, a tightness that made her breath shallow. What if she didn't sleep at all? How would she function tomorrow? Would she miss crucial information? Would colleagues notice her fatigue and judge her? Would her questions during the sessions seem muddled or confused? Would this single night of poor sleep somehow undermine years of dedicated work and study? The cascade of worries grew into an avalanche, each concern tumbling into the next with increasing momentum. The irony wasn't lost on her. This anxiety about sleep was the very thing preventing it, creating a cruel cycle that felt impossible to break. She reached for her phone, knowing she shouldn't. The blue light would only further disrupt her circadian rhythm, but perhaps a distraction might help. She scrolled through emails she'd already read, checked weather forecasts for cities she'd never visit, and found herself absently reviewing social media feeds that offered nothing but further evidence that the entire world seemed to be sleeping peacefully except for her. The minutes ticked by, marked by the changing digits on her phone's clock. 12:14 a.m., then 12:27 a.m. Each passing minute felt both endless and too swift, a paradox of night anxiety where time simultaneously dragged and raced. Eventually, she navigated to a meditation app she'd downloaded months ago but rarely used. It sat nearly forgotten among her apps, installed during a period of good intentions that had quickly been buried under the demands of daily life. "What do I have to lose?" Olivia murmured, selecting a sleep meditation. "I'm certainly not getting any rest doing what I'm doing now." She adjusted her pillow one last time, placed her phone face down beside her to minimize the light, and settled onto her back, trying to quiet the voice in her head that reminded her even this attempt was likely to fail. A gentle voice emerged from her phone's speaker, speaking at just above a whisper. "Welcome to this moment of pause. There's nothing you need to fix right now, nothing you need to solve. For these next few minutes, your only task is to be present." Olivia's immediate thought was one of doubt. Presence wouldn't help her sleep. She needed unconsciousness, not mindfulness. The voice was asking for the impossible. How could she possibly be present when every fiber of her being was focused on escaping the present into sleep? But something in the voice, its unhurried pace perhaps, or the quiet confidence in its tone, made her continue listening. There was a steadiness there that felt like an anchor in her stormy night. Take a deep breath in through your nose and release it slowly through your mouth. Almost against her will, Olivia followed the instruction. Her lungs expanded, pressing against her ribs, then emptied in a long, controlled exhale. The simple act of consciously breathing felt strangely novel, as though she'd forgotten this most basic of human functions. Again, notice the cool air entering your body and the warm air leaving. She followed, allowing her attention to focus on the sensation of breath moving through her body, the coolness at her nostrils as she inhaled, the warmth as she exhaled, the gentle rise and fall of her chest and abdomen. 3 breaths later, Olivia realized her shoulders had dropped away from her ears, releasing tension she hadn't even recognized was there. 5 breaths later, her jaw unclenched, and a slight ache revealed how tightly she'd been holding it. 7 breaths in, and she noticed how her fingertips had stopped their restless movement against the sheets. 10 breaths, and the space between her eyebrows softened, smoothing a furrow that had formed there without her awareness. Now I'd like you to notice your thoughts without becoming attached to them. Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating down a stream. You don't need to dive in after them. Just observe them passing by. Olivia visualized a woodland stream, sunlight dappling its surface. A leaf, "I'll be exhausted tomorrow," drifted past. Another leaf, "Everyone will notice," followed it. She watched them float away, not fighting them, just acknowledging their presence without assigning them power. The gentle voice continued, "Sleep isn't something you do. It's something you allow. Your body knows how to sleep. It's been doing it your entire life. Tonight, your only job is to create the conditions where sleep can find you." This reframing struck Olivia with unexpected force. She'd been thinking of sleep as a performance task, something she needed to accomplish, to succeed at. But what if sleep wasn't about doing at all? What if it was about allowing? "Even if sleep doesn't come tonight," the voice continued, "rest itself is restorative. Your body benefits from quiet relaxation, even when you remain conscious." This thought offered Olivia her first glimpse of genuine peace. The pressure to achieve unconsciousness had been driving her anxiety. But what if she simply aimed to rest? That was attainable, regardless of whether sleep followed. As the meditation continued, Olivia began a body scan, noticing tension and consciously releasing it, starting with her forehead and moving down to her toes. First her forehead, where worry had etched temporary lines. She imagined the muscles there softening, melting like snow in gentle sunlight. Then her eye sockets, allowing her eyeballs to rest heavily in their natural cradles, releasing the strain of hours spent reading research papers earlier that day. Her jaw, chronically tight from concentration and occasionally clenched during sleep, now deliberately relaxed. Down through her neck, where knots of tension began to unravel under her focused attention. Her shoulders, bearing the invisible weight of professional expectations and personal standards, now invited to simply be rather than do. Then to her chest, and slowly down towards her abdomen, through to her pelvis, her legs, and finally her feet. Every part of her body receiving momentary attention and permission to release. The process was slow, deliberate. For once, she wasn't fighting against time. She was moving with it, surrendering to its natural flow rather than racing against it. The paradox wasn't lost on her. By ceasing to pursue sleep so frantically, she was creating precisely the conditions in which sleep might find her. When the meditation ended 15 minutes later, Olivia didn't reach to restart it. The silence felt complete and comforting now. No longer an empty space to be filled with worried thoughts, but a gentle presence of its own. Instead, she lay in the darkness, continuing to breathe deeply. She noticed the weight of her body against the mattress, the gentle pressure points where her form met the supporting surface. She felt the soft cotton of her sheets against her skin, now a pleasant sensation rather than an irritation. From outside came the distant sound of wind in the trees, a natural lullaby she'd been too preoccupied to notice before. She thought about tomorrow's conference with a new perspective forming in her mind like a clearing sky after storm clouds. Yes, it was important. The conference represented months of anticipation and years of study. The presentations would offer insights that could potentially guide her research in new directions. Yes, she wanted to be alert, present, and able to engage fully with the material and her colleagues. But worrying about a lack of sleep wouldn't help her achieve that goal. In fact, it was working actively against it, creating the very problem she feared most. Moreover, she recalled reading about how the brain consolidates memory even during quiet restfulness. The research had shown that while deep sleep offered the most efficient memory processing, periods of calm wakefulness still allowed for considerable neural activity and integration of information. Perhaps simply lying here, peaceful and relaxed, was doing more good than she realized. Her brain, even in this state of gentle wakefulness, was likely still processing the journal articles she'd read in preparation for the conference, making connections, and storing information that would be accessible tomorrow regardless of whether she achieved the perfect night's sleep she'd been demanding. This thought offered a profound comfort. There was benefit even in this imperfect state, her body and brain still renewing themselves, still preparing for tomorrow, just through different pathways than she'd expected. Olivia's mind drifted to the content of the conference, but unlike earlier when these thoughts had triggered anxiety, now they emerged with genuine curiosity and interest. The latest research on neuroplasticity fascinated her. The brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. There was something profoundly hopeful in this understanding. Even adult brains, once thought to be relatively fixed in their architecture, showed impressive adaptability in response to new learning, experiences, and even recovery from injury. One study she'd read described how taxi drivers in London developed larger hippocampi, the brain region associated with spatial memory, as they memorized the complex city streets. Another detailed how musicians' brains showed enhanced connectivity between auditory and motor regions. The brain, it seemed, was constantly responding and adapting to meet the demands placed upon it. Perhaps her approach to sleep needed similar flexibility. Rather than rigidly demanding that her brain perform on command, ordering it to sleep according to her schedule, she could trust its natural processes. Sleep, after all, was an adaptive function that had evolved over millennia. Her brain knew how to do this, if she could just get out of its way. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, a neurologist dedicated to understanding the brain's sophisticated mechanisms, had momentarily forgotten to trust the very organ she studied. In her anxiety, she'd treated her brain like a machine that had malfunctioned rather than a living system with its own wisdom and timing. A memory surfaced of a conversation she'd had with a colleague about sleep pressure, the biological drive that builds the longer we're awake. It was a fascinating process, one she'd discussed academically but was now experiencing quite personally. Each waking moment increased adenosine in the brain, a neurochemical that accumulated throughout the day, eventually creating an almost irresistible pressure towards sleep. This was why caffeine, an adenosine antagonist that blocked receptors without activating them, could temporarily stave off sleepiness, but couldn't eliminate the need for sleep entirely. Even now, that process was working within her, regardless of her conscious worries. With every minute she remained awake, sleep pressure was building, preparing her brain for eventual rest. Her body was wise in ways her anxious thoughts were not. It had regulatory systems that operated independently of her racing mind. This understanding offered a curious comfort. She didn't need to orchestrate sleep. Her biology was already working toward it. Perhaps not on the schedule she'd hoped for, but working nonetheless. Olivia rolled onto her back and placed one hand on her abdomen, feeling it rise and fall with each breath. The gentle motion connected her to a rhythm more ancient than her worries, the simple in and out of breath that had accompanied humans through countless nights, troubled or peaceful. She remembered something her grandmother used to say during difficult times. The night is long, but dawn always comes. As a child, Olivia had found it a simplistic platitude. As an adult experiencing her own dark night, metaphorical or literal, she found unexpected wisdom in the words. There was comfort in that inevitability, that constancy. Whatever happened tonight, whether she slept deeply, fitfully, or not at all, morning would arrive. The conference would happen. Life would continue. The world wouldn't end because of one night of poor sleep. And wasn't that the real fear beneath her anxiety? Not just that she would be tired tomorrow, but that somehow this single night would have catastrophic consequences. Seen in the gentle darkness of her bedroom, with her hand rising and falling with her breath, that fear seemed both understandable and excessive, a natural human worry magnified beyond proportion. And wasn't that ultimately why she'd pursued neurology? Not because she had all the answers, but because she was fascinated by the beautiful mystery of consciousness, by the intersection of biology and experience. Tonight was just another facet of that journey, not a failure or crisis, but an opportunity to practice compassion toward herself and her restless mind. 1:17 a.m. Olivia noticed the time without the panic she'd felt earlier. Nearly 2 hours had passed since she'd first looked at the clock, though it seemed like both longer and shorter. Time was strange that way, especially in the quiet hours when most of the world slept. She thought of all the other people lying awake at this moment. A silent community spread across the darkened landscape of her city. New parents tending to infants, their exhaustion mingled with wonder at the tiny lives they'd created. Emergency workers on night shifts, deliberately inverting their natural rhythms to keep others safe. Patients in hospitals, navigating illness and unfamiliar surroundings. Travelers adjusting to different time zones, their internal clocks temporarily misaligned with the world around them. Students studying for exams, sacrificing sleep for knowledge. The anxious, the grieving, the excited, the inspired, and countless others, like herself, minds too active for sleep despite their body's fatigue. There was a peculiar solidarity in that thought, a reminder that sleeplessness wasn't some personal failing, but a universal human experience. Throughout history, humans had weathered nights of wakefulness, sometimes productively, sometimes painfully, but always as part of the shared tapestry of human experience. For the first time that night, Olivia felt less alone in her wakefulness, less isolated by her struggle. She was part of this night world, this community of the temporarily sleepless. Olivia turned onto her side again, this time without frustration. The movement felt different now, not the annoyed shifting of earlier, but a gentle repositioning, an act of care for her body rather than an expression of irritation toward it. She tucked one hand beneath her pillow and closed her eyes, not attempting to force sleep, but simply allowing her body to rest. The distinction felt important, the difference between demanding and inviting, between forcing and allowing. She recalled reading that even when we think we're awake throughout the night, sleep studies often show people drift in and out of light sleep without realizing it. The research had revealed that participants who claimed they didn't sleep a wink actually spent significant portions of the night in stage 1 or stage 2 sleep, though these lighter sleep stages didn't always register in their conscious memory. Perhaps that would be her experience tonight. Moments of consciousness interspersed with periods of light rest that she might not even remember. The thought was reassuring, suggesting that even now, she might be receiving more benefit than her worried mind could perceive. She thought about the presentation scheduled for tomorrow. The keynote would focus on breakthrough treatments for neurodegenerative diseases, a topic close to her heart, since her grandfather's struggle with Parkinson's. She remembered him in his later years, how his hands had trembled when he tried to hold his teacup, how frustration would flash across his face when his body wouldn't obey his commands. Yet he'd maintained his gentle humor, a sense of calm dignity, and a deep curiosity about the world. The body may falter, he'd told her once, but the spirit needn't follow suit. There was wisdom in those words that applied to her current situation. Her body might not be providing the sleep she wanted right now, but her spirit, her approach to this challenge, remained within her control. There was an afternoon session on sleep disorders that now seemed particularly relevant. The session would cover insomnia, sleep apnea, narcolepsy, and the emerging research on how these conditions affected not just nighttime rest but daytime cognitive function. Maybe she would have a new personal perspective to bring to that discussion. Her academic understanding of sleep was now complemented by this lived experience. This night of wrestling with her own expectations and fears about sleep. There was value in that perspective, a bridging of theoretical knowledge and personal insight that might actually enrich her engagement with the material. As her thoughts meandered through the conference schedule, they became less sequential, more dreamlike. The rigid boundaries of waking thought began to soften, giving way to the more fluid associations characteristic of the transitional state between wakefulness and sleep. Images floated through her consciousness, not as worries to be solved, but as gentle visitors passing through. The conference center she'd visited once before, with its soaring atrium and abundant natural light. The face of a colleague she was looking forward to reconnecting with, someone whose research complemented her own and whose conversation always sparked new ideas. The slide deck she'd reviewed earlier that day, with its graphs showing promising results for a new therapeutic approach. The blue dress she'd laid out for tomorrow, chosen for both comfort and professionalism. Her grandfather's hands, steady in her memory before illness had claimed their stillness. These thoughts didn't demand attention or solution. They simply passed through her awareness like clouds across the sky. She observed them with a curious detachment, neither clinging to them nor pushing them away, but simply allowing them their natural movement through her consciousness. Olivia's breathing deepened. The weight of her body seemed to increase, as though she were sinking gently into the mattress. The boundaries between thoughts and dreams began to blur in that mysterious threshold that precedes sleep. Her last conscious thought was not of the conference or her earlier anxiety, but of gratitude for this quiet moment of peace, for her body's wisdom, for the simple gift of rest, whether or not sleep ultimately followed. When Olivia's alarm sounded at 6:30 a.m., she opened her eyes with the disoriented feeling that suggests deeper sleep than she'd expected. She couldn't pinpoint exactly when consciousness had slipped away, but the quality of her fatigue was different now. Not the raw, jagged exhaustion she'd feared, but a softer tiredness that felt manageable. As she prepared for the conference, showering, dressing, reviewing her notes over a cup of strong coffee, Olivia carried with her a new understanding. Sleep wasn't something to battle or demand. It wasn't a performance to perfect. It was a natural process to be approached with patience and trust, much like the mysterious workings of the brain she dedicated her career to studying. At the conference that day during a coffee break, a colleague commented on how alert she seemed, despite the complex material they'd been absorbing all morning. "Did you get a good night's sleep?" he asked. Olivia smiled, thinking of her midnight journey from anxiety to acceptance. "Not exactly," she replied, "but I got what I needed." As she sipped her coffee, Olivia realized that her experience might help others. Perhaps the greatest wisdom wasn't in knowing how to avoid difficult nights, but in learning how to move through them with grace, transforming hours of potential anguish into opportunities for deeper understanding and self-compassion. That night, as she prepared for bed, Olivia felt none of the previous night's anxiety. The conference had been a success, not because she'd been perfectly rested, but because she'd been present, engaged, and open to the experience despite her fatigue. In fact, there had been unexpected gifts in her imperfect night. The vulnerability had connected her more deeply with several colleagues who shared their own stories of pre-presentation sleeplessness. Her personal experience had informed her questions during the sleep disorder session, leading to a rich discussion that might not have occurred otherwise. As she moved through her bedtime routine, brushing her teeth, washing her face, changing into comfortable pajamas, she reflected on how differently she felt compared to 24 hours ago. Sleep might come quickly or slowly tonight, but either way, she would be fine. The previous night had taught her that rest came in many forms, and that sometimes the most restorative thing wasn't unconsciousness itself, but acceptance of whatever experience the darkness brought. She dimmed the lights and sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, feeling gratitude for the lessons of the past day. There was a certain irony in realizing that a night she'd initially perceived as failed had actually offered valuable insights she might have missed during a night of perfect sleep. The struggle had been real, the fatigue genuine, but so too was the growth that had emerged from navigating those challenges. Perhaps this was true of many difficult experiences. They offered their own unique gifts, invisible during the struggle but clear in retrospect. She settled under the covers, appreciating their comfort without demanding that they deliver her immediately to sleep. The pressure was gone. replaced by a gentle curiosity about what this night might bring. She placed her hand on her abdomen, feeling the rise and fall of her breath, this ancient rhythm that had carried her through all her days and nights, that would continue to carry her forward. Olivia took 3 deep, deliberate breaths, feeling each one fill her lungs completely before flowing out again in a slow, measured exhale. And then she whispered to herself the truth she had discovered, words that felt like both a comfort and a liberation. You don't have to sleep, you just have to rest. Your body knows what to do from there. The wisdom felt both personal and universal, a truth she had discovered through her own experience, but that likely resonated through countless human nights across time. The distinction between demanding sleep and allowing rest was subtle but profound, a shift in perspective that changed everything. And with that thought, Olivia closed her eyes and surrendered to the night, neither pursuing sleep nor fighting wakefulness, but simply being present in the gentle darkness that surrounded her. In that moment of surrender, of acceptance, she found what she had been seeking all along, not necessarily sleep itself, but the peace that makes sleep possible. And whatever the night brought, dreams or thoughts, deep sleep or gentle wakefulness, she would receive it with an open heart, trusting in her body's wisdom and the natural rhythms that had guided human beings through countless nights before this one. The digital clock on her nightstand read 10:37 p.m. Outside, the wind still moved through the trees. The world continued its turning. And Olivia breathed, simply breathed, present in this moment between day and dreams, awake to the quiet miracle of rest in all its forms.